Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third in our series of Next Generation Inclusive Thinking webinars. Today it's all about adjustments in the context of COVID-19. Obviously, this has been a very strange time for everybody, and it continues. A lot of uncertainty that's having a different impact on everybody, and for some people, you've adjusted, and maybe some people even prefer this situation, this way of working. But I know that for some others, it's not the same. And so everybody's impacted differently. And really the purpose of today's webinar is to talk through particularly adjustments and what sort of impact it might have on your adjustments in recruitment processes and also in the workplace, and to give you some level of comfort around what sorts of things you can still ask for. It doesn't change your rights, it doesn't change the Equality Act and what you can ask for, it doesn't change employers' duty to be able to give you the adjustments that you need, and it certainly shouldn't change your willingness to actually ask for the adjustments that you need to navigate the recruitment process in the workplace. So welcome very much. I want to introduce you to my co-host Sarah, who will be acting as the moderator and asking questions later on. And you'll have noticed we've got closed captioning going on thanks to Georgina, who's joined us as well. So Sarah, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I look forward to receiving your questions a bit later on.
Great, thank you. Now, as always, I'm going to just go on to slide 2 just to talk you through our important notice that all of our webinars are for information purposes only. Their contents not constitute legal advice. We'll make our webinars publicly available, but they cannot be on the condition that their contents in their entirety or part are not copied, reproduced, sent, emailed, distributed, shared, or further reproduced in any way without our express written permission. And their contents constitute original work and are protected by copyright on intellectual property of EmployAbility. Great, so now that we've got all of that bit out of the way, let's move on to the next bit of how this works. I know some of you have joined these webinars before, so you'll be really familiar with this, but just for those of you who haven't, those of you who are new with us today, we cannot see or hear you, so please feel free to use any software that you've got, any accessibility software. All questions and queries should be asked in chat. So when you, if you want to ask us any questions or if you have any queries, then please do use chat for that. Only the panelists will be able to see what you have written in chat. And as I said earlier, Sarah will read out those questions to me later and we will go through some of those. I'll try and answer as many of your questions as I can in the limited time that we have. If you have any very particular questions, particular to your particular case, then do feel free to send those to us afterwards as well. And we're going to give you a short feedback form, a type form that you can enter any questions on or information on, or give us feedback, which we'd love to have from you. And also, if you want us to contact you, if you've got a particular query, please do provide your contact details, your email address there as well, and that will enable us to reach out to you afterwards. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to now actually just ask you to do a quick poll, as we do every week. And it's really just to find out roughly how many of you who've joined us today are a student, or this was also open to university staff. So really how many of you are university people joining us today, either from careers or disability offices or other, or how many of you are from any other organisation as well. So just to give us a sense of who's joining us today. So it seems we have about 60% students and about 40% university staff today. So welcome all. Very, very happy that you have been able to join us. And we hope that whether you're a student, whether you're somebody from a university, we hope that you will be able to benefit from today's session and to ask any questions that you've got. So for those of you who are joining us and are students today, please do register with us on our website, or please encourage your students to register with us. You can, through this, by registering with us for free, access any of our support. We can help you with online applications. We can advocate on your behalf in terms of adjustments. We can certainly work with you to establish what adjustments you might need in the recruitment process. And also we can provide support in terms of any difficult questions you might have to answer, such as competency questions, or if you're not sure about how to ask for the adjustments you need as well, we'll support you with that. Again, as I said, it's completely free for you if you're a student to join our service, and just register and then you can get access to the support that we have available for you. So I wanted to move on next to talking about adjustments just in general in normal times. So what sorts of things might you be needing to think about in terms of adjustments? So really just sort of the usual things. So the things that we are often asked about in terms of when people are going through a recruitment process, or people are going through thinking about workplace adjustments. Some of the sort of typical things might be things like additional time for timed assessments and interviews. You may need to have you may need time to think through your answers. You might just want to have a bit of time to process the information. So things like additional times are adjustments that you can ask for. Or you might need something in an alternative format for interviews. More and more employers are using things like pre-recorded video interviews in place of face-to-face. And you can ask to have a telephone interview instead, or you can ask for certain things like video chat or so on during that interview if you want to, or you can ask for extra time in that as well. You could ask for written assessments instead. In terms of tasks or instructions, sometimes people want those provided in a written format. I know that we have lots of students who often want to maybe have information in written format, or occasionally ask for information ahead of time in terms of questions that they can get before that. So make sure that you are happy to ask for any changes you want to things that have things in alternative format. Of course, I know that some of you with different types of disabilities might be using different hardware or software. Again, perfectly reasonable for you to request that to be able to access parts of the process, or indeed in the workplace. Some people use things like support workers, so people who might be hearing impaired might be using support workers, and or you might need another type of support worker with you. Or things like changes to physical environment. If you're in a wheelchair, for example, you might need wheelchair accessibility, or if you have other types of disability. And then rest breaks. Rest breaks can be important when managing health conditions, so that's perfectly reasonable to ask for as well, as is time off for medical appointments. So how does that change? How does that change in the context of COVID, and what does that mean in the context of COVID in terms of what sorts of adjustments you might be needing? I know that for some of the employers that we work with, they are still going to be going ahead with things like internship programs, but they'll be doing those remotely. So what impact will that have? What difference will that make? What changes does that bring? Well, things like additional time, that I think pretty much remains the same. So as in normal times, you might need extra time to think through your answers, whether you're doing this remotely or in any other way. You might want to have a think about the fact that video conferencing is no different. You can still request the same adjustments as extra time as you might have done out of COVID times, if you like. So again, do talk to us about the extra time and what sorts of adjustments you can get for that. That is still perfectly reasonable for you to ask for those. You might have been invited to a phone interview, but may feel more comfortable to maybe do that through remote chat, or you might feel more comfortable to do that through video conference. Again, all of those alternatives are still open to you. And I know that for a lot of people, using remote ways of accessing things may be new, may be different. It would be reasonable for you to request training on using a remote format, and there shouldn't be an assumption that you as an interviewee would know necessarily how to use that. So again, any of those things are perfectly reasonable and okay for you to ask for. I know that for some people with neurodiverse conditions and possibly other disabilities as well, there's been some reportings of finding difficulties with remote working. It's raised people's anxiety levels. particularly in terms of using video conferencing with the camera switched on constantly, or having to switch between different screens and platforms. So one of the adjustments could be to have your camera switched off at times, requesting that, and that can be the same if you're back to an internship this year and you have to join lots of meetings, and making sure that you're taking proper rest breaks. So maybe making sure if it's possible for you to not line up lots of meetings one after the other, wherever that might be possible and within your control, or requesting if that can be done in a way which is you're not having back-to-back meetings that you might find tiring and stressful. And making sure you've got proper technical support ahead of time. As I said, any training, any accessibility issues, making sure that those are all available so you can participate without stress. In terms of for interviews, I know that for some people, body language during an interview can be impacted by your disability. Some of you might find it difficult to make eye contact, or find it difficult to keep still or to show facial expressions. And these are often things that can be exacerbated during a video conference with it or an interview. And an adjustment could be to make the interviewer aware of that beforehand, so that that doesn't go against you, that you're not going to be judged on things like eye contact, for example. Or possibly, again, an adjustment could be asking to have a telephone interview or to have the camera switched off. So these are all different possibilities. In terms of interpreters, that remains the same. British Sign Language interpreters that can be requested, can still be available. You can still have remote captioning, just like we're having on this session today, to enable you to participate in meetings or in interviews where you might need to do that. And I think feedback is particularly important. As you're not in the office, you might need to request more regular feedback sessions with your manager, as you won't have the regular face-to-face contact in the normal way. And these can help you to be comfortable that you're on track. It can enable you to ask questions you may have, or to ask for support if you're unsure, perhaps, of how to progress with a particular task, or a particular assessment or assignment that you've been given to do. So I think all of these things are some things that are slightly different. So some things remain the same, as you can see, and some things become different in this particular context. And I think the main things to really think about is still, don't be afraid to ask for the support that you're going to need. Don't be afraid to request the support that you need. Make sure that you are able to access appropriate support. And I guess that really is the bulk of what I wanted to say about adjustments and the difference in adjustments. And so really I want to open up for next questions, basically. So I don't know if anybody who's joined us has got questions around this that they want to put to us, or questions around adjustments in general, what sorts of things you can ask for. Please do feel free to send your questions through to us. And Sarah, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Here I am.
Great.
Yes, so as Tab said, please do send in your questions. Be great to hear from you.
So, well, one of the questions I can see is, do we know what platforms have auto-captioning? I don't off the top of my head know that. I know that we really struggled when we were going to be running this webinar. We really struggled to get auto-captioning that was going to be good enough, really, for this session. And so we are using a speech-to-text reporter, sort of Georgina, who's actually typing things out for this session as I speak. Somebody's just asking, if somebody has a hearing impairment, can we use speech to text for all or some may need BSL too? So yes, some people, you're right, you can use speech to text software, or some people might need BSL. And again, you can use support workers like Georgina, who we're using today, or you can, if you do know about platforms that have auto captioning, you can use that as well.
Just on the auto captioning, I did see one recently, I think it was Google Meet had auto captioning that seemed to work very well. So that might be worth trying that one.
And yes, sorry.
Go on.
I was just auto captioning does also depend. Somebody just pointed out on the institution switching it on. So of course, yes, so it might be something you have to request from whoever's hosting, for example, to enable that.
Great. There's a question here that's come in asking about adjustments during interviews and the recruitment process in general. So what about adjustments for those in the recruitment process, interviews, etc.?
So as I said earlier, I think of course, absolutely, you are still entitled to have adjustments in a recruitment process, in interview, in the same way as you would at any other time. Some of those, as we've discussed, may need adapting you might need different sorts of adjustments because of accessing those interviews or assessment centres or processes remotely. But we are really happy to have any discussions with you to discuss what those changes might be, what adjustments you might need, but also any changes that might be relevant for you as well. There's a question that I can see here: are employers being flexible regarding alternative formats for psychometric tests? They're going to be used more in the process, but we hear some negative stories about how accommodating some employers are. How can applicants approach this subject? So thank you for that. And the person who's asked that, are you a careers advisor? Or are you actually a student? Yes, you are. Okay, well, thank you for that. Are you all right to let me know where you're from? If you are, then please just put that in the chat, and that's fine. But yes, of course. Thank you. Thanks very much, Natalie. So yes, it is. I think psychometric tests do pose problems for people with disabilities, different problems for different people with disabilities. More and more employers use these because it's a way for them to reduce down numbers of applications to manageable ones that they can then process. But they pose all sorts of different problems. So for a lot of people, not only is it testing your logical reasoning ability or your numerical reasoning ability or your verbal reasoning ability, but also one of the things, because of the nature of the test that it tests, is your ability to process information in the short-term memory repeatedly. And we know that for some people, that can be problematic. Employers, yes, do make adjustments for these. We certainly get really involved in requesting adjustments for these for students from employers, and some of these adjustments might be one of extra time. Some of these occasionally can be ones, and not necessarily just the 25% maybe that you get at university, but you may need more extra time than that. Some of these can be maybe doing the test in a different format. Now, in normal times, some people have preferred to actually go and do written versions of the test. That makes it slightly more problematic at the moment. But some of these, very occasionally, we have asked for up to sort of 100% extra time, or again, very occasionally, even an exemption if it's simply not accessible because of your disability. Sarah, any other questions coming through?
Yes, there's one here that asked, if I'm a student, would my DSA cover the cost of a support worker, for example, to subtitle Zoom meetings?
So if you're talking about employment as opposed to adjustments at university, so my speciality is really talking about adjustments, talking about adjustments in employment or in the recruitment process. So when it comes to recruitment process and employment, certain types of adjustments, yes, are covered. Well, all adjustments are covered, actually, and an employer has a duty to cover those adjustment costs. But there is also something called access to work that you are able to access that benefits employers, because then they don't have to meet those costs. So things like support workers, often you can get the cost of that met through access to work, and it's a form that you fill out. Again, we can support you with that. But importantly, I think the part here is that the duty is actually on the employer to ensure that they provide you with the adjustment that you need, with or without any funding they might be able to get through access to work.
Thank you. Excuse me. There's a question here that asks, if we are doing a long training session, what would be your advice on how to break this down in terms of bite-sized sessions?
So I guess if you're doing a training session, if you're doing that obviously at the moment online, I would say sort of 45 minutes probably is our max. I would say is a reasonable amount of time to run the session for, and then I'd say really quite good idea to take a break. Interestingly, we're going to be doing some insight days with one of our clients in September, and we've already been having discussions about this now in normal life, that would have been a full day's insight day. But instead, what we're going to be doing with that, with this particular employer, which we've discussed with them, is to be running 5 one-hour sessions across a whole week. So whilst in terms of commitment, that does mean that students will have to keep coming back to the session to participate in that insight event, it does also mean that they have breaks, and that they can attend an hour a day and not be exhausted by that.
Thank you.
There's a couple of questions that I can see coming in about adjustments and disclosure. There's one which is saying, what's your view when asking for adjustments, which would then alert the hiring company about your disability? I know that there's a policy in place to avoid discrimination in the hiring process, but there are ways that employers can get about these and give, here it says, fake reasons as to why they hired the person with no disability as opposed to the person with a disability. So there's a couple of, and I know there was another question earlier about when is the right time in the process to talk about your disability and ask for reasonable adjustments. So I'll go back to some of our earlier webinars we've run over the last couple of weeks, which was really all about this. So I don't think this is about disclosure. This isn't about giving an employer information that's your private personal information. I think what is really important, though, is that if you need adjustments in a process, that you need to be comfortable to ask for that adjustment. Because without that adjustment, it might mean that you aren't able to compete in a level playing field, and that may then mean that you don't succeed in the process. So I think what's really important is to be very clear that you don't need to tell an employer about your disability or any details of your disability or the name of your disability. And actually employers can't ask you about that. And that's your right to privacy and choice. They can't ask you for proof, they can't ask for educational psychologist reports. They do ask for these things, but they're not supposed to under the Equality Act. So you'd be well within your rights to say that under my privacy and rights, that is not information I'm willing to provide, but I will let you know what my adjustments are. So they can ask you for adjustments, of course, and they should ask you for adjustments because that enables them to level the playing field for you. So I would say ask for the adjustments that you need, be clued up about knowing what the recruitment process is going to involve and entail, what sorts of things you'll be asked to participate in. Make sure you've got enough information about that for you to be able to understand what adjustments you are going to need to be able to navigate that successfully.
Yeah, there's a question here asking, with ASD, would you think it's a suitable adjustment to see a mentor once a fortnight if required? This person is asking is that suitable through access to work in Scotland?
So if somebody is on the autistic spectrum, a suitable adjustment, if you're talking about workplace suitable adjustment, may indeed be to request a mentor or to have a mentor. If you have a mentor that you would like to see once a week, I think that would be reasonable if that helps you in the workplace. Of course, the Equality Act also applies in Scotland, so it's very likely to be a reasonable adjustment that you can ask for. And what I'd say to whoever has asked that question is please do reach out to us and we can have a deeper discussion with you about that as well and how to go about accessing that support.
Yes, I would say that as well. I think you also had another question and we would happily answer that over email for you, so please do get in touch. Somebody's asking here about mitigating circumstances and how you feel to have that's viewed by employers if they are to put that on their application.
So again, I'd say mentioning your mitigating circumstances on an application, because without mentioning that, you may feel that you're not best able to demonstrate your abilities. Maybe you didn't get the grades you were expecting. Maybe you took longer to complete a degree. Maybe you didn't have access to the sort of work experience that you think other people may have had access to. Any of those sorts of things, or anything else that you think may make employers view your application or your CV less favourably. I would say it's really important to mention your mitigating circumstances. Again, you don't have to give the details of your disability in that. You simply have to state the situation. So you could simply say something along the lines of, I had a mitigating circumstances, for example, where I didn't have the support available for my disability, and this impacted me in whatever way it was. This impacted me with the grades that I got. Now that I have that support in place, my grades have improved. For example, that's one way you could do that. So provide enough information for the reader to understand what the mitigating circumstance was, but not so much that you feel uncomfortable with the level of personal private information that you may wish or not wish to disclose. So it doesn't have to be detailed in terms of your personal private information about your disability, but sufficient to enable the reader, the recruiter, to make the reasonable adjustment that that mitigating circumstance shouldn't go against you.
Thank you, Tab. Somebody here asked whether you have any advice on sort of applying for jobs in this time of COVID. Do you think there's any differences people might be able to take on board?
Yeah, so actually, just for 1 second, just something else I just remembered, going back to the mitigating circumstances. COVID can be taken into account too. So any impact you might have had because of COVID, for example, either because you were ill with COVID, or maybe a family member was, or anxiety or stress caused by COVID, any of those things can also be taken into account as mitigating circumstances. Sorry, Sarah, you were just saying about applications in the time of COVID.
Yeah, no, yes. Do you have any advice, for people when they're applying to jobs in this time? Is there anything different they should be doing? Any kind of upskilling, anything like that you could recommend?
So I think in terms of applications, of course, in any case these days, most applications are online. You fill them out remotely, etc. So that remains much the same. You're still going to be applying online for things. I think in terms of what can you be doing, I think really use this time to really understand what the recruitment process is going to entail. I think what exercises are you going to be participating in? How might that make things different for you? Have a think through also. I think in this situation, lots of us have learned to adapt in different ways, and maybe have become aware of skills that we didn't know about that we had before, maybe have become aware of other challenges we didn't know about before too. So perhaps reevaluate some of your skill sets, reevaluate the things that you think you are particularly skilled at or very good at. I think it's a really good opportunity, a really good time to be reevaluating your skill set, to be thinking about what exactly is your skill set, what you think you're good at, reevaluate, have a think through, not only what have you done before, but also how you've been impacted currently and what learnings you've gained from that, I would say.
Great, thank you. And just 1 second. Somebody here is asking, they're thinking of moving to another job. Would your advice be to start looking now and apply, or wait until the COVID situation is over?
I'd say that because there is so much uncertainty about when the pandemic is going to end, and quite what that will mean in terms of going back to the way that things were before, quite what that will mean in terms of meetings or interviews or connections as we had before. I think because there is still so much uncertainty about that, I would say that I wouldn't wait. I'd say it's okay to, if you're thinking about moving to another job, if that's what you'd like to do, I think it's okay to have a look and see what's available, and to explore that. Now, of course, it is possible that there may be fewer things available at the moment because of the virus. It may be that many employers, of course, are uncertain too about how their business is going to be impacted. So there may be certain things that they may have put on hold at the moment. And I know that different employers are responding differently to that based upon their own size, circumstances, the area of business they're in, and so on. So you might find that there's fewer opportunities available at the moment, but I would say that I think it's still, you can still look for those and see what is there and see if there's anything of interest to you there.
I think you may have covered this one, but somebody was asking about the need for adjustments in the job, but not the interview process. So they were asking when they should talk about their adjustments and disability in that situation. And I think, as we always say, you know, it's on a need-to-know basis. So, you know, talk about your adjustments when you need them. So it might be that you don't need them in the interview process, but then it might be that when you are offered that role, it's at that point that you will talk about your adjustments.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I would get through the recruitment process first. If you get offered the job, then that is the time to be talking about your adjustments in the workplace for the role itself, not during the recruitment process, as Sarah said. I can see, Sarah, here there's a question. Somebody is asking and wondering how you can network with recruiters whilst in lockdown.
That's a good question.
Yeah, very good question. So of course, as I was saying earlier, normally we would run things like insight days, or you might go to other events that an employer is hosting, where you can network with recruiters, with other people and so on, where you can physically network with them. But of course, you can still network, albeit differently. You can network through LinkedIn, you can network through other social media, you can respond to people and ask questions. So the networking, the way we network is limited in the sense that you can't do it physically, but you can still do it through social media and through social networks. So I would say that it's still a good idea to do that. And that, yeah, absolutely, please do network.
Tab, have you any advice for anyone who perhaps has a mental health disability and, you know, perhaps is struggling a little bit with how to sort of navigate the recruitment process in this time of COVID? Have you got any advice on that at all?
So yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think this time of COVID has posed really different difficulties for people. I think mental health, people with many different types of mental health is one area where I think that it has really impacted some people. And I know that for me, I can have panic attacks in normal life. And I know that for me at the beginning of this whole period, it was really quite tricky when I was feeling incredibly anxious and almost in survival mode. And I really had to think about some resilience to get through that. One of the things that really helped me, and this may be helpful to other people there who have mental health difficulties, one of the things that really helped me was making sure I gave myself enough time, was things like mindfulness meditation actually was super helpful. And just even doing that for 5 or 10 minutes a day was really helpful. And then I think for me, letting my team know that I was being impacted in that way was again helpful, in getting acceptance from the team. In terms of recruitment, I think again, you might find recruitment processes, interviews difficult outside of COVID-19 times as well. And some of the adjustments can be things like asking for extra time, asking for understanding from the interviewers, saying that, you know, if you seem extra nervous in the interview, not to go against you. So those sorts of things can be helpful, and those sorts of things might be helpful now too. And again, whoever's asked that question, we're very happy to speak to you about your particular case. If you let us know if you let us know your email details in the form at the end, we're very happy to speak to you about in more detail about precisely how you are impacted and what we can do to help you.
Thank you. And I guess just following on from that, someone here has asked, would you say that companies are still recruiting at the moment? Have you seen, have we seen many jobs out there that you think they're still recruiting for?
So most employers we work with, certainly for things like internship programs, tend to open these in early summer. So typically around about any time from June onwards, let's say June through to September, these tend to typically open. We certainly at the moment expect the large employers that we work with to still go ahead with opening those internship programs that will be taking place for the following summer, so for the summer 2021, or for graduate programs. So we aren't expecting at this point that to be different. Of course, this is a moving landscape at the moment, so we can't really say anything with any huge amounts of certainty, but I don't expect there to be any changes to recruitment, which typically takes place almost, you know, a year to 9 months ahead of time anyway for some of the big employers. I don't expect any changes in that necessarily. So look out on our website for programs that will be opening hopefully from June onwards. I want to just go back a little bit to the Insight Days that we spoke about. And so I mentioned we'll be running one with one of our employers, which we'll be promoting very shortly, so please look out for that in September. But we do run a number of Insight Days with other employers as well, just normally. And we certainly will be proposing to those employers that we do those remotely if we can't do those in person. And again, we'll be publicising those on our website, so please do look out for those as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's one here that's concerning like exam results. So will my first year results have an impact on my chances as the exams have all had to be online this year?
Yeah, so no, I think for many of you, whether you're in your first year and your second year and your third year, I think that's going to be something that it's on the front of mind for many of you. Obviously, exams have been online for universities. Some universities this year, different universities have handled that in different ways and had different arrangements for those. I was saying that I think if you feel that you've been impacted by that, or just by being in the current situation, if you're impacted by that, if you think your grades are impacted, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to put that as mitigating circumstances as far as employers are concerned, application forms. All sorts of people have been impacted. People at school kids in terms of GCSEs and A-levels have been impacted. That might impact whether people get to the universities they're expected to go to and so on. So there's been all sorts of different things going on at the moment. And I think forevermore going forward, everybody will always know that 2020 was that very strange year in which we were adjusted to something that was totally unexpected.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got another question here, and we are coming to the end actually of our webinar. So I will ask this last question. Do you think, Tab, that COVID may be a bit more beneficial for those with physical disabilities? Perhaps employers may, have more of an open mind now in this, given this current situation that we're in.
Do I think that COVID will be beneficial for those with physical disabilities? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, and it's a very good question. I think that I think one of the things that people, both in education perhaps, and certainly in employment, that people with physical difficulties may, or non-physical, or even mental health difficulties may, or other disabilities may have found difficult, may have been being able to physically be available in the workplace. And so I think for many people with different types of disabilities, in a sense, this working from home, remote working, where in many ways we may be able to take our own rest breaks or to arrange things differently, not have to travel, not have to think about physical accessibility or other kinds of accessibility. In many ways, that may be helpful to people with certain types of disabilities. And I think I was saying just at the beginning that I think for many people, this new way of working, maybe their preferred way of working, may be one that is particularly helpful for them. But I don't think at the same time that we should forget that for many people, despite that being helpful in those ways, and maybe for the same people, it may also just pose some additional challenges. And we talked about mental health, for example. There might be other physical challenges. Maybe not everybody's space is set up to work remotely from home. Maybe they don't have access to the equipment they need or the space that they need. And so there's other challenges. And I think just like at any other time, I think we need to be really cognizant of challenges for different people in different ways, in whatever way we're doing things. So for some people that may have found it harder before COVID, maybe easier for some things, maybe easier for them now, or maybe things have just got tougher, or maybe some things are easier and some things are harder. So I think we just need to be mindful of that.
Great, thank you. Well, that does bring us to the end of the session, but I just want to thank everyone for the questions. And also just to mention that there was a very specific question about health and safety in labs. And I just would like to ask that person to please email us that question with a bit more detail, and we will be able to reply to you on that. Thank you.
And finally, I just want to say we are here to support. With or without COVID-19, we're always here to support, and we are free. We offer a free service to disabled students and neurodiverse students. Please use us. If you're university staff here, I know some of you who have joined us today very, very well. I know you do publicise our services, but please continue to do that. Really appreciate that. And the last in our series of Next Generation Inclusive Thinking webinars is actually next week, which is specifically focused on tips for interviews and recruitment process for neurodiverse and autism candidates in particular, but that doesn't mean that others can't join. I'm sure we'll still pick up some great tips. So please do join us for that. And what we are planning to do, just so that you are aware, is we are going to be, because we're really again conscious that we want to continue to be able to support as best we can, we are going to be starting a new series of Next Generation Thinkers Q&A sessions at least once a month, that will be open sessions like this that university students and staff can join should they wish to. And we'll keep you posted of anything else that we're doing. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I'm seeing some lovely messages come through, so I'm glad you found it helpful. And thank you so much for joining us, to many of you who are writing in now. And to those that we might not know, but please give us your email details, contact us, and I look forward to working with you, supporting you, doing what we can to help. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.